I remember back in March of 2022 when I was driving to my first in-person therapy session. I had been given a list of, I think it was 10 different therapists from my medical provider. 8 of them were fully booked, and another one didn't even pick up. But then the last on the list, the one that was furthest from my house, quickly answered and was happy to book a session for me. When I entered the office, I spoke to the receptionist, who was this sweet old lady, and she gave me a form to fill out all my medical information. Standing next to her was this old guy with thick black-rimmed glasses wearing a gray suit. And as I looked over the form, this guy looked like he was studying my shirt. I was wearing a SpongeBob shirt that day, and he seemed confused by it. I just remember standing there awkwardly as he slowly read the small text on the shirt, and it dawned on me that this gentleman might just be my therapist. When I finally sat down in the waiting room to fill out my form, I realized why I was able to get booked so quickly. The place was empty. In the corner of the room was a TV set to Fox Business talking about the economic ramifications of the war in Ukraine, which had just recently started. Didn't really feel like a calm environment for a therapist's office. Worse yet was that as I was slowly filling out my form, my would-be therapist began to hover over me, waiting for me to be done. I told him it would be just another minute or so, and he finally made his way over to his office, but with the door wide open and him still peering at me as I sat there, debating what to do next. Eventually, I just got up and left without saying a word. I figured if my therapist had trouble understanding the shirt I was wearing, then chances were slim he'd help me with why I was there in the first place. So, it's been a while since I last uploaded anything on here, and some things have happened between then and now. I don't know how many of you watching really care about what I'm going to talk about, but I feel like I owe some sort of explanation for why I've been gone. I figure the best place to start is by addressing the biggest elephant in the room. Chances are, if you're subscribed to this channel, it's because over 4 years ago I made a mini documentary called Not So Grump. It was about the Game Grumps, a YouTube channel that I was and still am a huge fan of. The documentary was about the beginning of the channel and some of the drama surrounding one of the co-hosts, John Tron, leaving to focus on his own channel. One of the main reasons I made this documentary was because I had gotten tired of the discussion surrounding John leaving, and for whatever reason, I took it upon myself to clear the air and show that John Tron and the rest of the Game Grumps were still friends. Of course, that would prove a problem when I willfully ignored plenty of evidence to show that maybe they weren't still friends, and that led me to pushing my own narrative that things were okay while convincing myself that it was the truth. I guess I should be thankful that I did this over a YouTube channel and not something more serious and life-threatening, but that's beside the point. Either way, I somehow didn't realize my mistake until much later. The video didn't hit it off immediately. It got a little bit of attention and the comments were fairly positive. Then suddenly, something like 10 months later, YouTube decided to put it in everyone's recommended feed and it just exploded in views. It felt like I was getting more comments in a day than I'd gotten in the past year. But obviously, with that much attention, negative comments were bound to show up. And as much as I had heard YouTubers talk about negative comments and how it affected them mentally, I thought I was prepared to handle it and I tried my best to ignore it. But soon it felt like the negative comments outweighed the positive ones. It became this sick game where I would scroll through the comments to see all the good things people said until I found a negative one. But when I would see a negative one, I would just keep scrolling to see how much longer it would take till I got to another negative one. This isn't to say that some of the critical comments were without reason. I got plenty commenting on how I ignored key bits of information and others who were bothered by the voice I put on when I was narrating. And looking back now, I absolutely agree, but man, back then it started to become overwhelming. During all this, I was in the middle of working on my next video project, which was a Lego stop-motion anime spoof called Cherry Blossom. I planned for it to be a series that I could work on to have a consistent upload schedule, and as you can see by my channel, that plan worked perfectly. Making Cherry Blossom was fun. I got to use some fancy visual effects, the action came out pretty well, and I got my friends June, Parker, and Bonnie to lend their voices to it, and they did great. But I'd be lying if I said it was all fun. This was right in the middle of the pandemic. My college classes switched to being online, and the only times I would leave the house would be to work as a delivery driver for DoorDash. I had a lot of time to myself, and as much as I tried to keep myself busy, my mind always found time to think about Not So Grump. I eventually got rid of the YouTube Studio app on my phone so I could stop looking at comments so easily, but it didn't stop me from thinking about them. One of the things the comments brought up regularly was that I ignored the troubling comments JonTron made about race and immigration back in 2017. It'd be easy to defend myself if I had made the documentary before all that, but I made it 2 years after, more than enough time for the dust to settle and see what came of it, so I was rightfully chastised for it. Truth is, I was scared to talk about it. I wasn't a very political person when John said those things or when I made the documentary. And yeah, looking back now, it should have been obvious to me how bad what he said was, but back then, I was too big of a fan of the guy to think about it critically. I wanted to believe what he said was just a little blip on the radar and it wasn't a big deal to leave it out. I told myself that it didn't involve the Game Grumps directly, even though they directly addressed it, saying they wouldn't collaborate with him after what he said. But in my head, I had a ton of justifications for that, so instead of actually talking about it, I just threw a headline on screen when mentioning his respective low points or whatever I called it. Come 2020 and all the insanity that came with it, I started to really see how wrong I was to do this. But I still didn't want to remove the video. I was still proud of the video as a whole, and it meant a lot to me to show it to people who didn't know about Game Grumps or the YouTube space. Because of that, the video stayed up way longer than it should have, and it became a growing source of stress as time went on. I finished what was supposed to be Cherry Blossom's first episode in December of 2020, with plans to work on episode 2 at the start of the next year. I felt like I couldn't afford to relax. Episode 2 was going to be bigger and better. It was going to explore Misaki's backstory and feature more villains. I did storyboards, I built sets, I got fancy new LED lights, and I did a bunch of screen tests to try out new effects. I was really happy with a lot of the shots I got. Part of it was helped by the characters being on actual sets most of the time. But, given I was the only one animating, it took a long time to get any given sequence done. And doing stop motion is hard. There's a lot of trial and error that comes with it. One small nudge in the wrong direction and the whole animation might need to start all over. And when mistakes like this happen over and over and over, it's hard not to feel like a failure. The more time I spent working on episode 2, the more anxious I got about releasing it. I started to feel this urgency to finish episode 2 as fast as possible, only to remember I was nowhere near the end. And with Not So Grump still public, that only made the pressure worse. I started to allow less free time to myself. The times that I wasn't either in class or delivering food, I was working on Cherry Blossom. I didn't even make time to hang out with my friends, and I eventually got messages from them asking if I was okay. I said I was. I had been working on Cherry Blossom for several months, and I was barely a fourth of the way through the script, and more times than I can remember, I debated whether or not to stop. I was miserable at this point, and it stopped being fun. It was just a source of stress and nothing else. But I didn't want to stop because I had made it this far and done all this work, and I didn't want it to be for nothing. Because I had so many gaps in between making videos, I believed I didn't deserve to relax and that giving up on Cherry Blossom would be an excuse to be lazy. I had graduated from community college majoring in communications, which I chose because it seemed to be a safer option than majoring in film. My major in communications carried over when I transferred to a 4-year university, hoping that I could take classes I was actually interested in since I got all the general education stuff out of the way in community college. But whether it was my major or the American education system playing a prank on me, I had to take more general education courses that I felt like I already took, so it was like nothing had changed. I felt like I was stuck. I was taking classes I didn't care about, I was still delivering food, I wasn't taking enough time to hang out with my friends, and I was working on a video project that made me miserable. And then, one night, it all came to a head. It was around midnight. I had been working on this sequence for a while now, and I was trying to set up a difficult shot, but nothing looked right. I didn't have enough light to work with, I didn't know what to do with the background, I kept fidgeting and messing things up, and all the while I thought about the more time I spent working on this one shot meant more time having to spend on this sequence, which meant more time I had to spend working on this video that I feel like I'm never going to be able to finish and prove that I'm good enough, and I dropped everything. I grabbed my phone, walked downstairs, and I sat at the kitchen table alone, thinking. I needed help. So I looked up places for therapy. I mean, it seemed like the obvious choice. So many other YouTubers with vastly larger audiences than mine talk about it, so I figured it's worth a shot. But I didn't feel ready to commit to in-person therapy. Shit, I didn't even feel ready to tell my parents I needed it. So I looked at online therapy. I found a therapist and I started chatting with them. Not like on a video call, just through text. And for a while I tried to convince myself it was working. I even forced myself back into working on Cherry Blossom, but eventually I realized that it wouldn't last very long, and I stopped working on Cherry Blossom completely. It was around that time that I also decided to private Not So Grump. It really wasn't worth it to keep it public for so long. I don't know if anybody from Game Grumps ever saw it or would even watch this, but if you did, I'm so sorry. In my attempt to dispel rumors, I ended up spreading some of my own. But let me tell you, it felt like a weight had been lifted when I finally privated it. This thing that had plagued my mind for so long was finally gone. And I felt great. But I knew I couldn't just private it without saying something about it in the state of Cherry Blossom. So a few days later, I would try to make a video explaining it all, which was pretty much my first attempt at making this video. I was barely 2 months into online therapy, and looking back now, I can see that I made this video not because it was genuinely helping, but because I wanted it to look like it was helping, so I could move on to the projects I'd planned. I even held off dismantling all the Lego sets I built for Cherry Blossom so I could take them apart on camera so I could wrap up the video with a nice little bow on top. But the video never happened. Probably because I knew I wasn't genuine about me being okay. I would try to make this video a few more times because I felt like I needed to put something out there to explain myself, but eventually I just decided to leave it be and make the video when I actually felt like things were alright. Out of nowhere, I started to feel a sharp pain in my jaw. When I went to the doctor to see what was going on, they asked if I had been grinding my teeth a lot, which I realized I had. They asked if I had been experiencing a lot of stress lately, which I had. Then they asked if I was in therapy, and there I had to awkwardly explain that I was taking online therapy, which the doctor promptly said wasn't going to cut it. They said they would send me a list of therapy offices affiliated with a hospital, which, if you remember, didn't work out very well, and I was prescribed Lexapro in the meantime. While it obviously didn't just make me happy, it helped so much in clearing out the noise that I thought was just part of being alive. My mind was able to stop overthinking and stressing like it had done before, and best of all, it helped me put into perspective all the stress I'd felt for the past year or so. And so I decided to just move away from YouTube and work on myself. I hung out with my friends more, I dropped out of college after the first semester, and I decided to quit working at DoorDash to find a job where I could work with others. I eventually found work at a retail store, which I still work at as of this recording, and while it has its fair share of frustrations and stress, I've met some cool people there, so I can't complain too much. While I may have been away from YouTube, I still had plenty of other outlets to do creative work. For a few years now, I had been a regular volunteer for the production team of my church, running cameras and occasionally directing for Sunday services and other events the church would hold. It was there that I learned how to operate a Blackmagic camera, which led me to buying one for myself, and eventually using it to film videos for numerous businesses and personalities, and it's been amazing. There have been some rough spots here and there. One business didn't pay me the $1,500 I was due for the 4 videos I made for them, but then again, they might have gone out of business. I don't know, the owner stopped answering my texts when I asked about the money, so, make of that what you will. Other than that, it's been mostly smooth sailing. I filmed for a TEDx event, I shot videos for 3M, and most recently I've shot a couple promo videos for the Lighthouse Cafe, which was a lot of fun. I even made my own website to showcase my portfolio, and whatever else interests me that might not work for YouTube. Also, I've been going to a proper therapist for several months, and it's genuinely helped me. And now I'm in a much better place mentally, emotionally, and creatively than I was even a year ago. I'm thankful I was able to come out the other side of this still wanting to be creative, probably more so now than I was before. And needless to say, throughout all of this, I thank God every day for my parents, my family, my friends, everybody who is in my life that has helped me in one way or another to getting me through this, whether it was supporting me when I was feeling down or helping me out on some creative project I was working on, or even just being there to talk to, just to have a conversation with. Like, I feel like if not for them, I would be in a much different place. So thank you so much. So where does that leave the channel? Will Cherry Blossom ever come back? Not in its current form, at least. I think that there's something that can be done with Cherry Blossom. I think there's a fun story there, but I don't want to force it. Will I ever try a redone version of Not So Grump? A while back that was the plan, but now I don't think it'd be right for me to do it. Besides, I've been preoccupied working on a totally different documentary. It was a project I started on the side while I was still toiling away at Cherry Blossom, and I'm really happy with how it's turned out so far. It's a subject that's near and dear to my heart, and I promise that I've put in the utmost effort into researching it. I've learned from my mistakes. I want to do right this time. The script has been done for a while, but I felt the need to still address all the stuff with Not So Grump and Cherry Blossom, which was why I made this, which has been a larger undertaking than I kind of expected, because suddenly my Blue Yeti mic, which I've had for a few years, just decided to stop working properly. I tried multiple fixes to get it to sound right, and at this point, I'm just not bothered to deal with it anymore. So that's why I'm right now using a Rode mic that I usually have on top of my Blackmagic camera. So I hope this has sounded alright. I promise that for the documentary, it's not going to sound like this. I'm looking into getting like a proper XLR mic to record all the narration for it, and I also promise that my voice is going to sound better than it did for Not So Grump. I don't know when the documentary will be done. It's a much larger undertaking than Not So Grump was, but I'm excited to work on it. Other than that, I don't know what this channel will be going forward. I'd like to make another short film someday, and maybe just make videos about stuff I like in film and TV. Maybe I'll even try some stop motion again somewhere down the line. I don't know. We'll see. If you've stuck around this long, thanks for listening to my rambling. If you feel inclined to subscribe to a channel that doesn't know what it's going to be doing in the future, then go ahead and subscribe, I guess. If you want to check out the stuff that I've been working on outside of YouTube, you can check out my website, kincaidbischoff.com. And yeah, I don't really know what else I can say. I don't really know how to end this video. Like, I have this whole video scripted out, but I never really knew how exactly to end it. So, just thank you. And I hope you enjoy what I make in the future. See ya.